In this video, I am breaking down the rules to a Pokemon Kingslocke challenge. It is a playthrough of any mainline Pokemon game where you draw from a deck of tarot cards to dictate how you play. I will be explaining these rules based off Pokemaniacal's 3rd revised edition, link in the description. Shout out to them for creating this challenge. I had a really great time doing it, and I thought I would share this video of how to play it so fellow Pokemon fans can play along too. I'm sure you've heard of a Pokemon NUZLOCKE challenge before. Well, imagine a NUZLOCKE where every draw from the deck completely rewrite the rules of your run. Hopefully by the end of this video, you too will be down to kill your sanity and try this out. I'll start by reading the what you will need section straight from Pokemaniacal's website. You will need a Pokemon game. Any main game Pokemon game will suffice, excluding games such as Pokemon Legends Arceus. This will not be possible in a game like that. Then you need a tarot deck or a simulation thereof. I used my trusty Spirit Halloween deck. It works. And you will need one or more observers to the game willing to occasionally invent custom rules and make other decisions. Anyone who knows you are playing a Kingslocke can be asked to step into this role at any time, and observers have no obligation to either be cruel or kind in any decision that they are asked to make. If you don't have any observers or don't want one, consult the variant rules section at the end of the page, sanity and willingness to sacrifice it. The fundamental rule is whenever you first enter a new area with either wild Pokemon or a significant number of trainer battles, as well as every time you lose a battle, you draw a card from the tarot deck and it tells you what to do. What does this mean? When should you draw? To some extent, it's up to you. I don't want to lay down hard rules for which areas count and which areas don't in a Pokemon game. Drawing a card can be good or bad. Basically, the main rule is saying that you draw a card whenever you would have a viable counter in a Nuzlocke. You would just draw a card from the deck and see what it makes you do. Long story short, you also draw for things like Team Rocket Hideout or like a base that might not have wild encounters but has like a lot of trainers or like a trainer gauntlet of some kind. For example, like the Lighthouse in Olivine City, Team Rocket Hideout, Magma Hideout, stuff like that. Pokemaniacal has 7 rules to the Kingslocke challenge. Don't worry if you can't remember all these rules. You'll always be referring back to the rules on the webpage when you get lost a lot during your own runs, honestly. Like I had it pulled up the entire time. I'm going to read what Pokemaniacal has verbatim and try to explain it in my own words after each of the rules. I do want to acknowledge their use of language in this document and these rules because like everything such as like the punctuation and all that matters, and if you like interpret the grammar incorrectly it can lead to problems in the runs, which did happen to me a few times. So I do want to like draw attention to that and note that it is important. Rule number 1, you may only catch a Pokemon when a card tells you to. If a card tells you to catch a Pokemon but there are no wild Pokemon in your current area, too bad, you miss out this time. If the card has any other effects, those still happen, and then we can expand the rules. There's a lot of click here to expand that goes into the rules more. Pokemon you receive from NPCs, like your starter, a reanimated fossil, Game Corner prizes, stuff like that, are always fair game. So you're always allowed to use Pokemon that are gift Pokemon, as what most people call them. A static encounter Pokemon like the Sudowoodo and Gold and Silver are always catchable. So that would be like the Sudowoodo and Gold and Silver, the Lapras that's available on Friday, the Giant Whale Lord in the DLC of Sword and Shield, just stuff that's like there you're allowed to catch. In Sword and Shield, this is more like specific to newer games like Sword and Shield or Scarlet and Violet. Pokemon in Sword and Shield's max raid battles are only catchable if a card allows you to catch a Pokemon of your choice. They cannot be caught as the first Pokemon you see. Like in a Nuzlocke where you catch the first Pokemon you see, there's cards that do that, but some do allow you to catch whatever you want. And shiny Pokemon are always catchable, so that's like in Nuzlocke, people usually have a shiny claws, so that's just always on in this game basically. Legendary Pokemon are catchable because all static Pokemon are catchable like you said before. However, when they are first caught or received, legendary Pokemon are sealed and cannot be used until they are unsealed. Several cards can do this. In addition, legendary Pokemon may not be caught using a Master Ball. I think the biggest thing to understand from this rule is that gift Pokemon and static encounters encounters can be used. It can be hard to get Pokemon to use during this challenge because of like the structure of the challenge, obviously. So this can be extremely helpful / necessary in a run. Of course, you can't forget the added caveat for the legendaries. If a card tells you to catch the first Pokemon you see, you may choose to skip Pokemon of species you already own or form of the same evolutionary line, although there are several reasons you might want duplicates in this challenge. In a Safari Zone type area where wild Pokemon of any species will sometimes run away, you may keep trying to catch a Pokemon of the first species you saw until you succeed. So basically dupes clause is a thing. If you've played Nuzlocke, you know what that is. You don't have to like have like 20 Rattatas. Like you can just be like re-roll is what they call it, but like it's just like, oh, if I ran into a Rattata and I already have a Rattata, I'm gonna run into another Pokemon until it's something different from anything that I already have, whether it was Rattata, Raticate, Bulbasaur, Ivysaur, Venusaur, like the same evolutionary line. And then this little stipulation about the Safari Zone, that's definitely like a good safety net for games that have the Safari Zone or like the Great Marsh. You basically just can't like get screwed out of like getting a Pokemon just because it fled from the battle. However, it does not say that for something like in Gen 2 where the Phanpy runs away, that I think you would lose out on that if it's not the Safari Zone specifically. That's how I'm taking that. You may only use TMs, TRs when a card tells you to. There's a lot of stipulations after this. In games that have HMs, you are always free to use HMs at any time. This includes Flash, Rock Smash in games where those moves are HMs but still have field effects, and you can never be forced to use an HM. If you cannot progress further in the story without an HM move and have no usable Pokemon that can learn it, you may temporarily withdraw an illegal Pokemon from your PC to navigate the obstacle. You must avoid using this Pokemon in battle at all costs. You may also temporarily withdraw an illegal Pokemon to fly between cities. As a last resort, if you don't own any Pokemon at all that can learn a required HM move, you may catch one to learn it. Again, you must always avoid using this Pokemon in battle. In games that have move tutors or move reminders, you may use them at any time as long as you can pay for them, except the free unlimited move reminders in Generation 8, which are treated as TMs. So this is probably the biggest rule outside of just like the main rule of like when you get to a new encounter, you draw from the deck. You cannot use TMs freely or TRs in Sword and Shield. I think this should be the second fundamental rule of the whole challenge. It is really important that you know that the TMs and the free versions of the move reminders are not allowed to be used. And always remember, you can go back into the game to get TMs you missed or can buy from stores, but you can't save it and go forward. Rule 4. You are free to trade for the purposes of evolving Pokemon, but must find any required items on your own game. You are also free to make in-game trades with the NPCs if you happen to have the Pokemon that they want. This is very self-explanatory. It's just like, oh, like in Gen 2, for example, say you caught a Bellsprout on like Route 32 or 31, whatever, I think it's 31, and then we're in Violet City and dude is like, hey, I'll trade you this Onyx for your Bellsprout. You're allowed to do that because you happen to get the Bellsprout already, but you can't go out of your way to catch the Bellsprout and do the trade if you didn't just happen upon that Pokemon organically. You can't like cheese by being like, oh, let me get my friend to give me a metal coat. It's like you have to find the metal coat on your own. Rule 5. Cards that describe ongoing rules stay, quote, in play, quote, until something happens to get rid of them, and then are shuffled back into the deck. There is no discard pile. Cards with no ongoing effects are shuffled back into the deck as soon as their effects are resolved. In addition, only 3 cards from the major arcana, the cards that don't have equivalents in a normal deck of playing cards, can be in play at once on a first in, first out basis. If you ever have 4 in play, the oldest one returns to the deck. Now there are 2 exceptions. The 4 kings are removed from the game after being drawn, and the chariot returns to the deck immediately. Both have effects that persist after they leave play. So this is where things get a little wonky. Long story short, you have 3 slots for the major arcana. That's stuff ranging from like the Fool to Judgment in tarot cards, like the face cards, and not the numbered cards that have 4 copies of each, which would be like Ace, 2s, up through like page, queen, and kings. And then I think of the ongoing rules versus the immediate rules as like regular spells versus continuous spells in Yu-Gi-Oh! If you play that basically you would, if you played Yu-Gi-Oh! You already get it. Some of the numbered cards from the Minor Arcana do have ongoing effects that work the same way, and different ones that take other cards to remove. Rule 6. If you ever have no usable Pokemon left, you may catch the first wild Pokemon you see in your current location that is usable under your current restrictions. If there are none, you may retrace your steps back through other areas until you find one. However, you read the rules for each card carefully before doing this. Some are explicitly written to let you off the hook if following them is impossible. For example, if you have 6 in play but don't own any female or genderless Pokemon, the card allows you to use male ones. This is what makes a Kingslocke unlosable technically, because in a Nuzlocke you can lose if all your Pokemon faint. In this game you can't technically lose, and this is the kind of rule that like sets you up to where you can't just like not play the game at all. Like there's always something you can do to try to like get yourself back into the game basically. Rule 7. If 2 different cards give you conflicting instructions, obey as many as you can for as long as you can. Major Arcana cards are more important than Minor Arcana cards, and 10s are more important than the rest of the Minor Arcana, but Kings always trump everything else, hence the name Kingslocke. Cards with ongoing rules remain in play even if it's impossible for you to follow their rules right now. If you are playing with an audience, like for a live stream, feel free to take any particularly difficult conflicts to a poll. So I always follow as many rules as you can. That's just like the main goal of this, is like just try. The Major Arcana cards, the like one-of-a-kind cards, their effects are more important than the numbered cards from the Minor Arcana. And the Kings trump everything else. It is also important to say what this is not. This is not a Nuzlocke. There is no permadeath, even though it sometimes feels like there is, and no game over state in theory. If you keep going, you will make it to the end eventually. Nuzlockes punish you for playing poorly and being careless. The Kingslocke punishes you completely at random. Finally, there's a Zenith rule. The Kingslocke is really complicated, so don't sweat it too much if you get some of the rules wrong from time to time. Whatever you think the rules mean, I am prepared to endorse your version of the Kingslocke. So this is basically just, you know, don't sweat it too much about it. Is complicated. It is very complicated. Terms and definitions. We will start with card effect types. I will read what they have here. Card effects are either immediate or ongoing. Many cards have both. A card whose only effects are immediate does its thing and then is shuffled back into the deck. A card with an ongoing effect stays in play on the table. If you aren't using a physical deck, make sure to keep track of which cards are in play, and is only shuffled back into the deck after its effect is revoked or by another card, or its own end conditions are met. There is no discard pile. There are 2 exceptions. The Kings and the Chariot cards both have ongoing effects but do not stay in play. The Kings are removed from the game after being drawn, while the Chariot returns to the deck immediately. So basically what they're saying is that the cards either have an immediate effect or an ongoing effect. This is, if you've ever played Yu-Gi-Oh!, the easiest way to think about this is like regular spell card versus a continuous spell card. So it's like the difference between something like Monster Reborn or I guess Swords of Revealing Light. For continuous, they either just happen immediately and their effects resolve, or it's an ongoing thing that you have to deal with while you're playing. Banned. Pokemon that are banned cannot be used. They must be boxed at the first opportunity and cannot be returned to your active party as long as the card banning them stays in play. The way I handled this was I labeled an in-game box as banned, so I knew that if a Pokemon was in the banned box, that they're under the condition of banned. That means you can't use it. And there is like the difference between these and the other words that make you not able to use a Pokemon is that the card that made it banned can like be removed from the table and like unban the Pokemon. Petrified. Pokemon that are petrified cannot be used. They cannot be revived, must be boxed at the first opportunity, and cannot be returned to your active party. Unlike banned Pokemon, petrified Pokemon are not freed by revoking the card effect that petrified them. Instead, an observer must select and free one petrified Pokemon each time you win a milestone battle. For example, like a gym badge or Elite Four. Some cards can also free a petrified Pokemon of your choice. In standard rules, Pokemon are petrified if they faint while a 9 or death is in play, or if they evolve while the Hangman is in play. So petrified Pokemon can't be used. I label another box as petrified for when this happens. The most common situation you're going to find yourself in that's going to petrify Pokemon is if you have a 9 in play, which basically turns on Nuzlocke rules. So this is where, like, if the 9 is on and you're on a Nuzlocke and the Pokemon HP hits 0, it's petrified, or whatever other card says it's petrified specifically. You would put it in this box, and then just remember that if you win a gym badge or win an Elite Four battle, that something gets freed from being petrified, which that's way different from Nuzlocke's. Sealed. Pokemon that are sealed cannot be used. Legendary Pokemon are automatically sealed when they are first caught or received, except for Fione, who deserves a break. Okay, random. Anything that revokes a card effect can be used to unseal a single legendary Pokemon. And the effects of the tower, the sun, and the world unseal all of them. So basically, this is where you put legendary Pokemon. You would have a box labeled sealed, and if a card unseals Pokemon, you can use your legend. This rule about anything that revokes a card effect can be used to unseal a single legendary Pokemon. I did not know that when I did this challenge most recently, so that is something I feel like doing this video we're going to learn a lot of things that I didn't know during this challenge myself. That's definitely something to know. So it's definitely like worth going for legendaries in this challenge. Compulsory. Pokemon that are compulsory must be kept in your active party. Other card effects take precedent over keeping compulsory Pokemon with you. E.g., if a male Pokemon is compulsory and you have a 6 chicks in play, you cannot use it, but must return it to your active party immediately if the 6 is later revoked. If you have 7 or more compulsory Pokemon, you are free to choose between them. If you have a full party of compulsory Pokemon and also have at least one champion, your champion may take the place of one compulsory Pokemon. So compulsory is another box that you would label compulsory, and this just basically means you have to use the Pokemon. But obviously, like that example it gave, like if female Pokemon are banned and you have a male Pokemon that's compulsory, you wouldn't use it because like the ban supersedes it being compulsory. But then if that card made you not able to use the compulsory Pokemon goes away, you have to use it. Hopefully that makes sense. All this makes sense later, or all this will make sense, I swear. Champion. A Pokemon that becomes a champion may ignore the effects of all cards other than the kings and the card that made it champion. Cards that restrict which combinations of Pokemon you are allowed to use, like Judgment, the Hermit, or the Wheel, ignore your champions altogether. Example, if the Hermit's in play, you are free to use another Pokemon that has the same nature as your champion. Once the card that has made a Pokemon champion has been revoked, it loses its special status. So I just take this, long story short, if it's champion, it's immune to all the rules, so you don't have to like worry about what's going on with it or like any restrictions on moves, gender, any of that. You do have to remember though that if a card makes a Pokemon a champion, the most common one I saw in my playthrough was the Knight card. If that card is removed from the board, is removed from play, you are no longer champion. Locked. Moves that are locked cannot be used. If a Pokemon has no unlocked direct damage moves or is out of PP for all of its unlocked moves, it may temporarily ignore one of the cards locking its moves, but must learn an unlocked move if it gets the opportunity. In this situation, you must use a TM or a TR if you have or can easily buy a compatible one, but you are not required to use move tutors or move move reminders, including free ones post Generation 8. This rule is one of the more complex parts of the game. You do have to realize that you're not allowed to use TMs freely in this game or move tutors that are for free. You can use move tutors that you have to pay like a heart skill to, but not like the free ones in the modern games. Yeah, so this is just for moves. So like there are cards that limit like what moves you're allowed to click, and just always remember that if you're locked out of being able to attack, you are allowed to use a TM or a TR or whatever to fix that, but that's the only stipulation. Revoked. When a card's rule is revoked, that rule is no longer in effect and the card returns to the deck. Minor Arcana cards with ongoing rules usually have built-in ending conditions, except for the 8s and 10s. Most Major Arcana cards do not. However, if you have 3 ongoing Major Arcana cards in play and draw a 4th one, the oldest one is revoked. Major Arcana cards that do not remain in play after being drawn, such as these examples, do not count towards the limit. In addition, the 10s, if an observer is feeling generous, all these other cards have the power to revoke other cards. So this just means the rule is over now, and that you put the card back into the deck if it wasn't already. For the Major Arcanas, you have 3 slots, and it's first in, first out, with like regards to like slot 1, slot 2, slot 3. Cancelled out. Several Minor Arcana cards with ongoing rules, such as these, can cancel themselves out if you draw another card of the same value. When that happens, the old one is revoked, and the new one does not replace it. They both return to the deck. However, if the new card also has an immediate effect, such as catching a new Pokemon, that still happens. 8 and 10s do not cancel out. Multiple 8s and multiple 10s can be in play at the same time. So this is similar to revoked, but when something's revoked, a new rule is replacing the revoked card. In this situation, when it says it's canceled out, it's like it gets rid of the one card and doesn't apply this card effect either. So like for example, if you draw like a 4 and are in stab lock and then draw another 4, that gets rid of both of them, instead of just like replacing like a 5 with a 6 or whatever. The first Pokemon you see. In Generation 8 Plus, it's no longer clear cut what the first Pokemon you see on each route means. Most areas in Sword and Shield still have both random encounters, wild overworld encounters, and some areas may have no fully random encounters at all. I'm writing this before playing Scarlet and Violet, but my understanding is that they're moving completely to overworld encounters. A few different answers to exactly this problem has been written for Nuzlocke, and you're welcome to use those but here's mine. In areas that have only visible overworld Pokemon, the first Pokemon you see is the closest one when you draw the card. If you can't see any, walk in any direction until you can see one. In areas that have both overworld and fully random encounters, you can choose when you draw the card, catch either the closest visible Pokemon or your next random encounter. If the Pokemon you get is a duplicate of one you already own, you're allowed to keep looking as normal, but your choice, random encounter or overworld, must stand. Queens tell you to keep catching the first Pokemon you see until you meet a repeated one. Each time you catch a Pokemon before the battle ends, you may choose again, either look for a random encounter or go to the closest visible Pokemon. Is it possible to game this ruling? Yes, probably, and I would respect you for it. So I personally did do the Kingslocke of Sword and Shield, which is what they're talking about here, and I did not use any overworld encounters. Anytime it said catch the first Pokemon you see, I always used an underworld encounter, because usually you could, or actually almost always you could, or fishing was still in the game, so I did fishing if I had to do that. But in something like Scarlet and Violet, I don't know what I would do what I would do personally is like, I've seen people be like, to make it random, they just find what area they're in Scarlet and Violet and use like a random like spin a wheel thing with all the Pokemon. I would probably do something like that before I did this whole like the first Pokemon that's closest to you thing, but I guess that could work too. Or I've seen people go into an area in Scarlet and Violet and just literally like close their eyes and just run into a Pokemon. that would probably be okay. I'm definitely excited to see how I would interpret that when I ever do one myself, but that is kind of like up to you on how to handle the overworld encounter situation. If you do want to know what each card does, I will be reading what Pokemaniacal has written about each card verbatim, and then after that I'm going to go into my own words, and based off of my own Kingslocke challenge that I finished of Pokemon Sword and Shield, I will interpret like the cards in my own words. And I just wanted to say this was such a fun challenge. Doing this in a modern game like Sword and Shield, it really just like made the game challenging. I know a lot of people say the modern Pokemon games are really easy now, and I will say that this level of complexity is what it took to make this game hard. And I had such a great time. Getting to include chat and like some of your decisions and stuff is really fun. And we had to really think on our feet and get creative with like strategies. And I highly recommend doing this challenge, especially in modern Pokemon games. The cards. Everything else on this page explains what all the different cards do and how to resolve conflicts between different cards and rules. You do not have to know what every card does before you start playing. If you want, you can look them up and as you draw them and learn as you go. If you'd rather know what's in store for you, keep reading. For each card, information in the main text block is essential to understanding the rule, while information in the collapsible sections deal with clarifications, conflicts, exceptions, and special cases. So I definitely read this through all the way once, but I didn't like commit it to memory at all because it's like impossible to even now. But it is very easy to pick this up as you go along by drawing the cards, as long as you've went through all those like main rules and the terms, everything we talked about before. And like I said, like I even said this already, that you can just draw, like learn as you go. The easiest way to know when to draw is basically when you would catch the first Pokemon you see in a Nuzlocke in a new area, you can draw from the deck. I am going to go into the explanation of every card in the tarot deck and what it does. So starting with the minor arcana, we're going to begin with Ace. So this is the cards that there would be 4 of these in the deck. Ace, Waterfall. Ongoing, you cannot switch Pokemon in battle unless one faints or is forced out of play. When your Pokemon do faint, you must use them in party order. You may still change your party order outside of battle. This rule is revoked when you draw a 9/another ace or 9/snake eyes, and cancels out if you draw another ace. Expand. If a Pokemon is forced out of play by a move like Roar, the new Pokemon may still not switch. If it faints, you must return to using Pokemon in party order. Pokemon with moves that switch the user out, such as Baton Pass or U-Turn, are free to use them. However, you must switch to the next Pokemon in party order. Champions, or other Pokemon that are able to ignore this rule for whatever reason, are always free to switch out to either another champion or the next Pokemon in party order. So this is referring to, in your party you have a team of 6 Pokemon. So when this card is in play, it's one of the ongoing effects that are in the minor arcana. It stays on till it's said that you either draw a 9 or another ace. So you would use the first Pokemon and you have to use it until it faints or gets switched out by like Whirlwind, or if you have U-Turn. But then if that Pokemon is either switched out by move or faints, you would move to the second Pokemon on your party order screen. Like you can't, if like you have one Pokemon in slot 1 and one in slot 6, you can't go from 1 to 6, you have to go from 1 to 2 to 3, like in a waterfall. So the namesake makes a lot of sense here. There is a card that makes it a Nuzlocke. This card and that card cannot be in play at the same time. That's what the 9 is. So don't worry about anything like that crazy. 2. Immediate. You may catch one Pokemon of your choice in this area and may teach one of your party Pokemon or the new Pokemon a TM or TR move of your choice. Very straightforward. Very good card to draw at the beginning, obviously. So you just draw the 2 and then shuffle it back in the deck, and you get to catch a Pokemon of your choice in your area. So if you're in Route 1, you get to choose between Rattata or Pidgey. And then you may teach one Pokemon in your party or this new Pokemon a TM. Very straightforward. Probably the only most straightforward card in this challenge. 3. Immediate. You may catch the first wild Pokemon you see in this area and may teach that Pokemon a TM or TR move of your choice. So this is where we see that phrase, the first Pokemon you see. This is a Nuzlocke, essentially, with the way the encounter works. So you just move into the tall grass, and the first Pokemon run into you catch it, and you're allowed to teach it a TM. 4 elements. Ongoing. Your Pokemon's moves that get a same type attack bonus or stab are locked. This rule cancels out if you draw another 4. Immediate. You may catch the first Pokemon you see in this area that does not share a type with any of your current party Pokemon. Expand. Moves that deal fixed damage, such as Dragon Rage, do not have stab. Moves whose type is variable, such as Hidden Power, Weather Ball, and moves that call other moves, such as Metronome, are exempt from this rule, even when they would get stab or could call attacks that get stab. So this card is probably, this one's the one that is my least favorite in the challenge. It makes it really hard, but we do have to remember that rule that you can, if you get, this is a good card that shows you the example of like, oh, you are locked out of being able to attack at all, so you're allowed to use a TM or a move tutor to fix this in this situation if you like literally can't attack. It's definitely one of the more challenging things, but it also does have the ongoing effect that not many of the minor arcana have, but it also has an immediate effect, so it has both. And you know, it's the catch the first Pokemon you see, like a Nuzlocke, but that doesn't share a type with any of your current party Pokemon. So like when you draw this card, you look at your party right then, and it's like you have to run into the first thing you see that doesn't share a type with any of your Pokemon that you currently have. And then all that about the stipulations, expanded rules about like the moves make a lot of sense. I don't think I need to explain that. 5, guys, ongoing. Your female Pokemon are banned unless you have no male or no genderless Pokemon. This rule is revoked if you draw 6 and cancels out if you draw another 5. Immediate. You may catch the first male wild Pokemon you see in this area. Expand. If you are playing a game that does not have gender, like Gen 1, ignore this card and draw another. So this is a fun thing that happens a lot. So this 5 stays in play and makes you only able to use male Pokemon or genderless. So this is a card that can switch up your team pretty randomly. It's pretty funny. I think it's a cute way to use the gender mechanic in a challenge, and it is fun that you get to catch the first male Pokemon you see in the area. That kind of like switches it up from like a traditional Nuzlocke encounter. When you run into it, you're like, oh, I run into this, like, oh, I hope it's a male and not female. 6. Chicks, ongoing. Your male Pokemon are banned unless you have no female or genderless Pokemon. This rule is revoked when you draw a 5 and cancels out when you draw another 6. Immediate. You may catch the first female wild Pokemon you see in this area. If you're playing, again, like if you're playing the game Gen 1, ignore it. So, and draw another. So this is the same thing as the 5, but female. 7. Lucky 7s. Immediate. You draw 2 more cards and follow the rule for both. Expand. Resolve the effects of the cards in the order that you drew them in. Example, if you draw a 5 and then an 8, the 8 applies to your longest surviving female or genderless party member. If you draw an 8 first and then a 5, the 8 applies to your longest surviving party member regardless of gender. So they're saying that it's you draw 2 and the first card you draw happens first and then you do the second card. Got it. That I never drew that when I did it at all. So that's actually the first time I've read that one. 8. Mate. Ongoing. The Pokemon in your current party that has spent the most time in your active party over the course of the game is banned. Expand. Which Pokemon gets banned may be a judgment call. If 2 or more Pokemon have spent roughly equal time in your active party, you may choose one of them. If your longest surviving Pokemon is currently a champion or is able to ignore this rule for some other reason, the runner-up is banned instead. Optionally, if time spent in your active party is too difficult to track, you may use levels gained since a Pokemon was met caught as a proxy to determine what should be boxed, or ask an observer to choose one of your Pokemon. So this card is pretty funny because it essentially is like almost guarantees that your starter will be banned at some point. I think there's a few cards that honestly like are just so targeted towards your starter. This would be like the most blatant one, but this card can come up multiple times in your playthrough. There's 4 in the decks, and when you draw it, it doesn't it goes back into the deck. The effect stays, but there's always 4 of these to draw at any point, so it is a little nerve-wracking, and you can't just like coast by on just your starter because of cards like this. 9. Snake Eyes. Ongoing. Any of your Pokemon that are defeated in battle are petrified. This rule is revoked if you draw an Ace/Waterfall and cancels out if you draw another 9. Expand. If this rule is in effect during an Elite Four Challenge or Galarian Championship tournament, you may bank victories over earlier opponents in order to have an observer free Pokemon petrified later on. For example, if you beat Lorelei and Bruno without losses, but then Agatha petrifies your whole team, an observer can free 2 of them before your next challenge. If you beat Agatha but lose 4 Pokemon in the process, an observer can free 3 of them, allowing them to be revived before you battle Lance. So this is the Nuzlocke card. I just call it in my head. It's just like if you draw this 9, it's just like, long story short, Nuzlocke rules are on, and just remember that you can't have the Ace in play about like the stipulations on switching out while this card, they can't be in play at the same time, so you're never really like screwed over that bad. But that's the only saving grace with regards to this, because there's so many other things that like limit move choice and Pokemon choice and etc. I actually, with this stipulation in the expanded, it's funny that it mentions that, because this actually happened to me in my Kingslocke I did of Sword and Shield, where I did have the Nuzlocke rules turned on during the essentially the Elite Four, and I lost some mons along the way, but we were always able to revive one, and like I would just use chat to be like, hey chat, like we have one revive and we have 2 Pokemon that fainted, like which one do we bring back? Actually, I might have messed that up, to be honest with you. I might have been like, I'm picking this because it's like I was in the final battle. Actually I did, so yeah, this is something I just realized I messed up. It's like I was supposed to let chat pick and I didn't let chat pick. It's like, I'm so sorry, Twitch chat. My bad. 10. Rule card. Immediate. An observer to the game may revoke any or all or none of the cards you have in play, and free any or all or none of your petrified Pokemon. Ongoing. Your observer may either make up a new rule, which becomes ongoing component of this card, or change the rules for one other card in play or in the deck except for the Kings. Expand. If the observer makes up a new rule with an ongoing effect, the 10 remains in play and acts as a normal minor arcana card. It can be removed by anything that can revoke other rules, and observers cannot add clauses like this cannot be revoked to their rules. If the observer modifies the rules of another card, creates a rule whose only effects are immediate, or declines to create a rule, the 10 returns to the deck immediately. A modified card retains its new rules even for the rest of the game. A modified card retains its new rules for the rest of the game even if it is repeatedly drawn or revoked. The only one card is modified, not all cards of the same value. Example, you change the 5 of swords, not the 5s. No custom rule can force a player to release a Pokemon. Rules that have effects outside of the game, like take a drink every time a Pokemon faints, are only allowed if the player has agreed to this in advance and set explicit boundaries about what kinds of rules are okay. So this is a very fun card. Obviously that was a lot of text about how it works, but I mean, just the gist of it is that you have like chat or like your friend make up a rule, or they have the choice to revoke all the rules or none, or free and it's your petrified Pokemon if they want to, as many as they want, or none. So that happens, and that person also makes an ongoing rule. There are a lot of like stipulations, like obviously you wouldn't want to like make someone do something that they're uncomfortable with, or like make them release a Pokemon, like that would be horrible. So it's like you can't be like evil, but there's a lot of fun things that can happen with this. I did personally draw this card once during my playthrough, but the only people watching chat at the time were like my mom and nephew, who doesn't play Pokemon or like know the rules that well. So that did fall under where, let me look at this. It said that they may, here it goes, or declines to create a rule. That's what happened to me. That might happen to a lot of people. It's like, oh, like there isn't anyone to like do this right now, or like the people that are watching like don't know. But I think we ended up just deciding together to just be like, oh, let's use the version of it that just gets rid of a rule. But yeah, so there's a lot of ways this card can go. Page, never have I ever. Immediate, teach all of your current party Pokemon a new move from a TM or TR. If possible, this must be a move that Pokemon has never known in the past. If some of your Pokemon can't learn any moves from the TMs you have, do as many as you can. Expand. You may use an HM to satisfy this card's requirement that each party member learn a new move if you want to. However, an HM is the only new move available to a Pokemon in your party. This card cannot force you to use it. If you are far enough in your game that you have access to shops that sell TMs, you may backtrack to visit them before resolving this card's effect. This is one that just lets you use TMs. Basically, I don't really think there's that much to explain. It's just like, and you have that rule addendum where you can backtrack to go get TMs like I talked about before. Night, challenge, ongoing. Choose one of your current party Pokemon to fight your next 5 trainer battles solo. If it ever loses, it becomes disgrace and is banned. If it wins every battle, it becomes your champion. Either way, drawing another night revokes all effects of this card and issues a new challenge. Compulsory Pokemon cannot be selected for the Night's Challenge unless you have a full team of compulsory Pokemon. Battles for the Night's Challenge must at least be approximately level appropriate to your current progress in the game's story. Using Fire Red, Leaf Green's Versus Seeker or other similar mechanics to get rematches with lower level trainers does not count towards the required 5 battles, nor can you leave 5 low level trainers in an early area of the game unbattled and return to them later to complete a challenge. While a Pokemon is taking the Night's Challenge, its moves that cause the user to switch, like Baton Pass, are locked. If you are forced to switch, like Roar or Whirlwind, you must switch back to the Pokemon taking the challenge as soon as possible. A Pokemon taking the Night's Challenge cannot be forced to switch by other cards. A Pokemon that has accepted the Night's Challenge may fight alongside partners in a double, triple rotation battle without failing the challenge. If a Pokemon taking the Night's Challenge becomes unusable due to the effects of a different card before the challenge ends, you must choose a new candidate for the challenge and start again. If a Pokemon taking the Night's Challenge becomes unusable due to the effects of a different card before the challenge ends, you must choose a new candidate for the challenge and start again. You may choose a Pokemon that already has champion status from another card to take the Night's Challenge. Whenever that Pokemon wins or loses, the Night remains in play and will take effect if the other card granting it champion status is revoked. So that was obviously, this is a lot of information for this card, but it came up a lot when I played, and it's a really good card if you do it right. So you draw the Night and you choose one of the Pokemon in your party, and you have to just use it only to solo the next 5 trainer battles, and you can't cheese this card essentially by going to low level places. I just basically always did it I was just whatever the next 5 battles I do as we go through the story, or in the route that I'm on when I drew it. But it's pretty funny. It's risky because you don't want to pick your best Pokemon and then issue the challenge and then fail it and it gets banned, but you also don't want to pick something weak that can't beat the challenge. So it was pretty funny. I had a couple champions throughout my playthrough of when I did Sword and Shield, and I think I got this card maybe 3 or 4 times and only passed it once, maybe twice, but it isn't permanent because it goes away if another Night is drawn from the deck and then you have to do a new one. So it's pretty interesting, but having a Pokemon that is a champion, at least one in your party, really is very good in this challenge. Queen, a ship came into the harbor carrying a boatload of Pokemon. Immediate, you may keep catching the first wild Pokemon you see in this area until you encounter one that you've already seen in this area. Do not catch the repeated one. Expand. As with other cards that let you catch wild Pokemon, you may skip catching Pokemon of species you already own. However, they will start to break your chain if you encounter the same species twice. In a Safari Zone type area where Pokemon of all species may run away, you may keep track of all the species you encounter before meeting a duplicate, then catch one of each. If you draw this card in an area that has no wild Pokemon, you may free one petrified Pokemon of your choice or teach one of your party Pokemon a TM or TR of your choice. So this is just a good card to draw no matter what. spot no matter where you're at, no matter where you're at in the game. Like, it's pretty cool. So I found that it was good to draw this and catch Pokemon through fishing in like towns that have fishing spots, worst case. But you do have the option to forego catching a Pokemon if there aren't any in the area you drew this in, and either free a petrified Pokemon or use a TM. So there's like a lot. There's 3 different things that could happen from this card that are all like really beneficial and helpful. And now for the last of the minor arcana cards. King, Vessel, immediate. Choose and box 1 member of your current team. You may catch a Pokemon of your choice from the current area to replace it, or free a petrified Pokemon of your choice. The boxed team member is placed in the vessel and cannot be returned to your active party. The kings are removed from the game after they are drawn. They do not remain in play or return to the deck, and their effects cannot be revoked by other cards. If there are 4 Pokemon in the vessel, those Pokemon are freed. All 4 of them become champions and are compulsory until you either earn your next gym badge or complete your next trial if it's Alola, or defeat the Elite Four. All other Pokemon are banned during this time, even other champions. Afterwards, your vessel Pokemon remain compulsory, but they are no longer champions. You may use other Pokemon as well, and these effects can now be removed by anything that can revoke a card effect. Expand. The vessel is sacred. No card other than kings may interfere with Pokemon in the vessel, nor may any card other than kings add Pokemon to the vessel. When choosing a Pokemon for the vessel, you can choose a champion or compulsory Pokemon. Either one will immediately lose their special status and gain the card granting that status. Will immediately lose their special status, and the card granting that status is revoked and returns to the deck if no other Pokemon were affected by it. Again, the vessel is sacred and the king trumps everything. So the king card is like the namesake of the game, and I did actually draw this card as my first draw in the whole playthrough, and I misinterpreted it and had to like go back later and kind of try to fix it. But so you essentially are going to label a box as vessel, it's called, and when you draw a king, you choose a Pokemon to put into the vessel, and then you can't do anything with it. And then if you draw all 4 kings during the playthrough, those 4 Pokemon that have been put into the vessel become your team, and everything else is banned. And then it said that happens until you beat the next milestone battle, either a gym badge, Elite Four, or whatever, and then those Pokemon are still compulsory, but then you can like add 2 more, long story short. So that never happened. I think I had 2 Pokemon in the vessel, so it was like my starter was in the vessel and then a Toxel. So it was like you have to kind of make sure you put decent stuff in there. But yeah, it's really risky, and it would be interesting to see a playthrough where that happens, where you do get all 4 Kings drawn, because that would be really fun to see like what goofy stuff you end up with due to that. The Fool. Ongoing. Whenever you catch or receive a new non-legendary Pokemon, that Pokemon becomes compulsory. The Fool can make up to 3 Pokemon at a time compulsory. If you obtain a 4th new Pokemon while the Fool is still in play, the first one stops being compulsory. In addition, as long as the Fool is in play, whenever another card tells you that you may catch a new Pokemon, you must catch one, or at least attempt to, if you are told to catch the first Pokemon you see. So this card, if a card, while the Fool is in play, if a card makes you catch the first Pokemon you see, like NUZLOCKE style, it gives that Pokemon a compulsory status, which basically means you just have to use it in your party, and it will do this for up to 3 at a time. The Magician. Ongoing, your Pokemon's physical attacks are locked. This rule is revoked if you draw Strength. Expand. Moves that deal fixed damage, such as Seismic Toss, are exempt from this rule, even if the game classifies them as physical. Moves which call other moves like Metronome are exempt from this rule, even if they would call physical attacks. This card can be in play in generations 1 through 3, but follows those games' rules for physical and special attacks. For example, physical attacks are all those from the following types: normal, fighting, flying, bug, poison, rocks, ground, ghost, steel. Okay, so essentially this card will be in one of the 3 slots, and while it's there, you cannot use physical attacks. This comes up like every time I've done one of these, honestly. It's like pretty funny. So you can only use special attacks, so no tackle, but absorb is okay. It says you can use metronome and like nature power. That's fine. Don't worry about it. And you can still use like seismic toss and super fang, which is kind of weird, but okay. And then obviously this is probably a bigger deal in Gen 3 and before, where like this card is basically like you cannot use these types, is all that meant. It's like, and they put the physical attacks types here, but the easiest way to remember that, if you don't know, is if you are doing this in an older game, which I probably would not recommend. It's like, this would be really hard. It's hard enough to Nuzlocke an older game like that. It's easier to remember it based off the evolutions and add dragons. So it's like if Eevee can evolve into this type, it's special, and also add dragon. The Empress, immediate. You may immediately revoke the effect of one card in play and either catch the first Pokemon you see in this area or free one petrified Pokemon of your choice. This is kind of straightforward with the context of all the rules and terms. The way I did this personally was when I drew this card a couple times, in my HUD, in the display of like the slots and like the active cards, I just put a copy of the Empress over top of a card that I chose to revoke because I wasn't sure. So I think I was doing that part wrong in my own stream, which that can happen. This is really complicated. So yeah, I did this wrong during my stream where I just put the Empress over top of a card. So if you use this to revoke the effect of one of your major arcanas, that would just take it out. So you could just remove like the one in slot 3, or if you removed the one in slot 2, you would move the one in 3 to 2 for the first in first out thing. So I was doing that wrong, but whatever. I'm glad that I think I've cracked that now. Like, it's saying to just get rid of the card and not, so that would just open up a slot in the major arcana if you chose to do it on a major arcana card. The Emperor, immediate. Catch the first Pokemon you see in this area. Ongoing, that Pokemon becomes a champion. Expand. If you draw this card in an area with no wild Pokemon, it does not remain in play, does not count towards your 3 major arcana slots, and returns to the deck immediately. Yeah, this is very straightforward. It's just like a really good card to draw. You draw it and you catch catch a Pokemon in the area Nuzlocke style, and then if you do catch it, it becomes champion while this card is in play. So it would go into like your major arcana slots, and while it was in the slots, that Pokemon you had caught is champion and is immune to the rules. The Hierophant, ongoing. Whenever you heal at a Pokemon Center or other healing location, including after losing a battle, you must pay a tithe by buying and immediately throwing away items totaling a certain amount of money. The tithe is equal to the number of badges you have earned, or Alolan Trials, times 1,000. If you do not have enough money to pay a tithe, you must sell items in order to pay for it. If you are left completely unable to pay a tithe even by selling items, the Hierophant excommunicates you. This rule is revoked and you must draw 3 more cards. Expand. The Hierophant can only force you to sell items that are purchasable with money at a standard Pokemart, such as medicine and Pokeballs, or items that have no purpose aside from being sold, such as nuggets. If receiving a healing at a remote location and do not have access to a shop, keep track of the number of times you use it and pay all your tithes at the next shop, even if the Hierophant is no longer in play by the time you get there. Tithes are only owed for healing locations that you can revisit repeatedly. Characters who heal your party once as part of a story event do not require tithe. If you are accompanied by another character who heals your party automatically after every battle, like Cheryl in Eternal Forest, you only owe a tithe if they revive at least one fated Pokemon. So yes, that was a lot, but it's pretty easy. I actually drew this card when I did the Sword and Shield playthrough, and basically what I had to do in order to accomplish this was when I used the Pokemon Center. I didn't have any badges at the time, so it was just 1,000. I bought, I think, 10 Pokeballs and sold them, and that made me lose $1,000. So then once I started getting badges, I just doubled it. So it was like, once I had 2 badges, I sold like I bought and sold 20 Pokeballs to myself just to make sure I lost the right amount of money. I never got in that situation where if you completely run out of resources, you have to send the card back to the deck and draw 3, which obviously that draw 3 would work the same way the draw 2 worked, where it would be like it's just first in, first out when in doubt. Yeah, I don't really think there's nothing else to explain. It's pretty funny. Like, it's a really interesting one. The Lovers, ongoing. Your party must consist of opposite gender pairs of Pokemon that share an egg group. Genderless Pokemon may be paired with a Pokemon of any gender that shares an egg group. If you only own Pokemon of one gender, or if all your Pokemon of one gender are banned or petrified, you may form same gender pairs, but must still pair Pokemon that share an egg group. Immediate. You may catch one Pokemon of your choice in this area that would form a valid pair with any Pokemon that was in your party when you drew this card. Expand. If you are playing a game that does not have a gender, like Gen 1, treat all Pokemon as genderless, even species that are exclusively male or female in later games, and as belonging to the same egg groups their species have in later generations. You cannot make more than one valid pair with the Pokemon you own, or cannot make any at all. You may include unpaired Pokemon to bring your party up to 3 total members. Legendary Pokemon from the undiscovered egg group as well as unknown can all be paired with each other. However, baby Pokemon in the undiscovered egg group cannot be paired with anything because Pokemaniacal and the Kingslocke do not endorse that. The following Pokemon are technically in the undiscovered egg group, but should be treated as belonging to following groups instead: Nidorina and Nidoqueen, put that in Field and Monster, Dracozolt, Monster and Flying, Arctic. Okay, and there's the monstrosity fossils go into these egg groups. Any same gender pairs you create are always valid for the rest of the game, even if your other rules change, and even if the Lovers leave play and you draw it again later. Those Pokemon are gay now. I don't make the rules. That was a lie. Literally, do you make the rules? Okay, so this is a really complicated card that I've never drawn personally, like when I did this, but it's essentially you're creating 3 couples. And there's all those stipulations that we just mentioned. They have to be in the same egg group, and you're trying to make male and female pairs, but can go gay for lack of options. And then you also can catch a Pokemon of your choice to help fulfill the requirement. So this is pretty cool, actually. Like I'm really into this. Yeah, like I'm into this. The Chariot, ongoing. You permanently gain 1 additional slot for ongoing rules from Major Arcana cards. The Chariot returns to the deck after being drawn, and drawing it multiple times continues to give you more slots. Expand. These extra slots are not lost when your ongoing effects are wiped by the Tower or the World, and you cannot remove them using the Empress, but an observer can choose to remove them along with other card effects when you draw a 10. Unlike other cards with ongoing effects, the Chariot does not remain in play, so it does not count towards your Major Arcana card limit and cannot be forced out by other Major Arcana cards. So I did draw this when I did my Kingslocke, and I only drew it once, so I ended up having 4 of the Major Arcana slots. We've been talking about how there's only 3, but this is the card that can make there be more, and it's pretty funny that you could technically keep adding it. But yeah, once I drew this card, the whole rest of the playthrough I had 4. And it like stayed like that the whole game. It kind of messed up my like display I had going on and made it look like even more tacky than it already did, but it was cool. It was fun I honestly, it's a fun like gimmick for this challenge. Like, I'm into it. Strength, ongoing. Your Pokemon's special attacks are locked. This rule is revoked if you draw the Magician. Expand. Moves that deal fixed damage like Dragon Rage, Nightshade are exempt from this rule, even if the game classifies them as special. Moves that call other moves like Metronome are exempt from this rule, even if they would cause special attacks. This card can be in play in generations 1 through 3, but follows the game's rules for physical and special attacks. Example, special attacks are all those from the following types: fire, water, grass, electric, ice, psychic, dragon, and dark. So I talked about this earlier with the magician. It's just the opposite version of that, so you're only allowed to use physical moves when this is in play. I still think it's weird that you can use Nightshade even though it's a special move, but fine. Metronome's fine. Obviously if you're in Gen 3 and before, this is like even harder. This makes it pretty hard. The Hermit. Ongoing. When you draw this card, choose one. Your party must not have two Pokemon whose natures increase the same stat, or your party must not have two Pokemon whose natures decrease the same stat. Expand. You may only have one and only one Pokemon with a neutral nature, which they list the natures. If you are playing a game that does not use natures like the old games, Gens 1 and 2, ignore this and draw another. So I never drew this card when I did this, but it's pretty interesting. So you choose, like, you can't have a modest Pokemon and a quiet Pokemon because both of those natures increase special attack. And you also can't have them, and they can't have the same decrease. So you can't have like a quiet and a brave Pokemon because both of those natures decrease speed respectively. So it's like, that is actually something crazy. I never had to like look at my Pokemon's natures when I played, so this is interesting that this card brings in natures. The Wheel of Fortune. Spin the wheel. Ongoing, choose one of the following restrictions by rolling a six-sided die. Whatever result you get, you cannot change a Pokemon's nickname while the Wheel of Fortune is in play. So you roll like just a regular dice block, six-sided, and I actually did get this card twice, and it is really confusing. So let's say you roll a 1. You cannot use two Pokemon whose nicknames start with the same letter or character. That happened to me. If say you roll a 2, choose one letter. Your Pokemon whose nicknames do not contain that letter are banned. Wow. 3. Ask an observer to choose two letters or characters. Your Pokemon whose nicknames contain either of those letters are banned. Okay, this happened to me in the playthrough, and I low-key dodged anything messing up my team in that moment. Say you roll a 4. You cannot use two Pokemon whose nicknames contain the same number of characters, including spaces and special characters. Say you roll 5. You may only use Pokemon whose nicknames all have the same number of syllables as you pronounce them. For a 6. Each non-compulsory Pokemon on your team when you drew this card, for each non-compulsory Pokemon on your team before you drew this card, you search your PC for a Pokemon whose nickname starts with the same letter and who is not currently banned, petrified, sealed, or in the vessel. If you find one, that Pokemon becomes compulsory and a champion. If you find 2 or more matches for a single party Pokemon, choose one, and the original Pokemon is banned. Okay, obviously the 6 is really complicated, and I don't even know where to begin trying to break that down, but long story short for this, I actually don't nickname my Pokemon, and I didn't even think about that being a thing until this card was drawn. But honestly, I just continued not nicknaming my Pokemon, and I just used these same restrictions based off their names. So it still felt pretty optional to me to nickname with regards to this, but I feel like you can go either way. Like, all these rules can be applied to just the Pokemon's names themselves. Yeah, I'm pretty burnt out at this point. Okay. Justice. Immediate. Catch one wild Pokemon of each species in this area up to 6. If there are 7 or more species that you do not already own, you may choose which 6 to catch. Count evolutions as a single species. Ongoing. All of those Pokemon are compulsory. Expand. You only need to catch Pokemon that are practically available to you in the area when you draw Justice. For instance, if an area has water and you do not yet have the fishing rod or the ability to cross water, you do not need to catch water dwelling Pokemon to satisfy this card. The same goes for Pokemon that only appear in certain seasons in like in Black and White. Pokemon that appear in different weather conditions, such as the wild area and Feebas and Gen 3 and 4. If you already know, you know. The only exception is Pokemon that are limited to a certain phases of day and night cycle. You may skip these if you are attempting this challenge live for an audience or for a speedrun. Otherwise, you should wait for them. If you run out of Pokeballs before catching every Pokemon you see in this area, you can and should backtrack to buy more. As usual, you may skip Pokemon species you already own. However, if you already own every species in this area, you must choose one of them to catch anyway. If you are playing a game blind and do not want to spoil which Pokemon are available in the area, take a decent stab at it. Don't move on until you get through 10 random encounters without seeing a new Pokemon. So there was a big block of text about the weather conditions and all that. I never drew this card, I don't think, so I don't remember it. Because catch one wild Pokemon of each species up to 6. So yeah, it's like you basically are just like, if you draw this, it goes back, or no, it has okay. So yeah, if you draw this, you are just essentially it's trying to get you to catch a whole new team and force you to use that team of 6 if possible. So this card you would need to draw in an area with like a lot of Pokemon, but obviously like you would get as many as you can, but you try to do at least 6, or at the most 6. The Hanged Man, ongoing. Whenever one of your Pokemon evolves, petrify it. Immediate. You may catch the first unevolved Pokemon you see in this area. Expand. Unevolved Pokemon are Pokemon that are in their lowest possible evolutionary stage as of the current generation. Example, Pikachu is unevolved if you're playing Gen 1, but not if you're playing Gen 3, where it can evolve from Pichu. This includes Pokemon that do not evolve at all, such as Tauros. So this is a pretty funny, like, catch-22 kind of, like, card where it's like, now, while this is in your active Arcana slots, you don't want your Pokemon to evolve. I personally didn't, like, press B to stop my Pokemon from evolving. They don't put anything about that, so I would assume that that's up to you as a player to decide whether or not, like, oh, my Ivysaur hit or my Bulbasaur hit level 16 and this card's in play. I let it evolve and then made it petrified, because you can always like free petrified Pokemon later technically, but I guess that is up to you on being, I guess it seems like you could just press B to cancel the evolution if you wanted, but that would be kind of, I feel like that's kind of like annoying. And then the thing about the Pokemon that don't evolve at all, yeah, so you would be allowed to catch a Tauros. Okay, I got it. Death. Ongoing. Any of your Pokemon that are defeated in battle are petrified. No petrified Pokemon may be freed, including ones that were petrified by other cards, except by the effect of the sun. Expand. Once the effect of death is revoked, Pokemon that were petrified by death may be freed in the same way as Pokemon petrified by another card. So this is kind of the same thing as the 9. So while death's in play, you have a Nuzlocke. They're petrified if they faint. You cannot free them from being petrified while death is in play, except if you draw that specific card, the sun. And then, okay, so then once death is revoked, once it goes back in the deck, anything that was petrified by this card are freed the same way as Pokemon petrified by another card. So yeah, this would do like, this is kind of weird. It's like a weird version of a Nuzlocke. So it's like, while it's in play, it's a Nuzlocke. They're petrified if they HP hits 0, but once death is out of the major Arcana slots, they all come back at once. Temperance. Ongoing. Your attacks with a base power higher than 80 are locked. Expand. Moves with variable base power, such as return and magnitude, are exempt from this rule, even in situations where their effective power would be higher than 80. Moves that call their move like Metronome are exempt, even if they would call higher attack power moves. Moves that hit multiple times, such as Fury Attack, are only considered to have their listed base power, and then Z move and max moves ignore this rule. Okay, well, this is a card I drew literally twice in the playthrough, and while it was in play, I did not think I wasn't using max moves, but I was allowed to, so I was definitely making it harder than it needed to be, and now that I'm reading this, I'm kind of mad, because it was really hard. Like, I literally, like, you can watch it, I literally, like, max guarded 3 turns in a row because I thought this card was not letting me use max moves, but you're allowed to. So that's hilarious and great. The Devil. If you own 8 Pokemon or fewer, not counting Pokemon in the vessel, when you draw this card, or if you're using a party given to you by the vessel, ignore it and draw another. Otherwise, immediate. Catch the first wild Pokemon you see in this area, then have an observer choose a new party of 6 Pokemon from all the Pokemon you own, except for Pokemon in the vessel. Revoke any ongoing rules that would make this team illegal. Ongoing, all of the chosen Pokemon are compulsory. The devil can select and free petrified Pokemon unless death is in play. The devil can select and unseal sealed legendary Pokemon. I actually did draw this card during that playthrough, and I remember the only person watching at the time was my mom, and she had to come through and pick out my whole team on stream. It was like so funny. And like she didn't know the names of the Pokemon, so it was just like like I put them all in a box and I was like choose 6, and I ended up having to use them. So that was cool, and they ended up being this rule didn't stick around for long. I don't remember what happened that made it go away so fast. Maybe I just drew into like more face cards. But yeah, it was like that was a very interesting chunk of the game, and like shout out to my mom for picking out my team. The Tower. Ongoing. Every Pokemon that was in your active party when you drew this card is banned. Immediate. Revoke the effects of all other cards currently in play. Only petrified Pokemon and Pokemon in the vessel remain unusable. Expand. If you have no other usable Pokemon, when you draw this card, you may catch one of your choice in this area or the most recent area with wild Pokemon that you visited, or free a petrified Pokemon of your choice. This is pretty funny. So bans everything that your team of 6 is banned, first of all. Then you revoke all the other cards and choose a new team. And then if you don't have anything, you can either unpetrify something or go catch something of your choice in the area. That's pretty funny because it has like an ongoing effect that keeps it in the slots and revokes all the other cards. So it sends everything else back into the deck, even like the major stuff. Only petrified Pokemon. Yeah, so you don't unpetrify anything or stuff in the vessel. I suppose you would unpetrify the stuff if it was like petrified from death instead of a non, for example. The Star. Immediate. You may acquire one new Pokemon of your choice from any area you have already visited using any mechanic available to you. Expand. Methods allowed by the Star include, but are not limited to, normal captures, breeding, the bug catching contests, honey trees, the Pokewalker if you somehow have one, hidden grottos, island scan, max raids, wonder trade, surprise trade. If any observer owns a game that can trade with yours, you may ask them for a Pokemon. They may give you one of their choice. You can breed Pokemon that are currently banned, petrified, or in the vessel. If you wish to trade for a Pokemon, you may catch any wild Pokemon to exchange or pick up one you already own. If you trade with an observer who's also running a Kingslocke, they are free to keep and use the Pokemon you give them. If you receive a Pokemon from a wonder trade that is at least 5 levels higher than every Pokemon you already own, it cannot be used until your Pokemon is within 5 levels of it. If that Pokemon is also higher than level 60, you may wonder trade it for something else if you wish. If you receive a legendary Pokemon in any kind of trade, it is sealed as normal. So this is pretty much like a saving grace card if you're like struggling with encounters. I think I actually drew this card twice, and obviously there was a lot of like things I could have done, but what I ended up just doing both times that I got it, which probably was suboptimal, I just thought back and was like, what's like the best Pokemon that I could add to my team in this moment to get me through the next gym badge? So I ended up with just like interesting types. I was just like, oh, let me get something that's this type or that can do this move for this gym badge. The Moon. Ongoing. You may not check information from any reference resources outside of the game. Example for encounter rates, base stats, move lists, area maps, or trainer data. If you're already playing the game blind anyway, ignore this and draw another. Expand. You may look up information that is strictly necessary in order to comply with other rules like natures or egg groups and stuff like that. If you are playing with an audience, you may ask your audience questions. However, they are encouraged to lie to you. This is actually a really cute card. I never drew this, but like it's an example of like what makes like this fun and like what the interaction with like Twitch chat makes it fun too, where it's like it would be funny if Twitch chat just like trolled you about like a question you had, but it does let you look up something like as extreme as egg groups if you drew the lovers, so that's nice to know. So it's good to definitely refer back to these rules to make sure that there's a stipulation like that. The Sun. Immediate. All ongoing effects that can ban a specific Pokemon. such as all these cards, are revoked, allowing you to use those Pokemon again. The non-death and the Hangman are not revoked and can petrify more Pokemon in the future. However, all of your currently petrified Pokemon are freed, overriding the effect of death. Expand. Any legendary Pokemon that you have captured or received are unsealed by the sun and can now be used. Custom rules created by a 10 are affected by the sun if they target one or more particular Pokemon rather than all Pokemon with a certain trait of a certain species. So this is another one of those like saving grace cards that make you able to use all the stuff you want to use. So all your petrified Pokemon are freed and all your banned Pokemon are free again, and you're allowed to use them. But the stuff that made a Pokemon specifically petrified, like the Nuzlocke rules being on, are like will continue to petrify Pokemon in the future. Those don't go back in the deck, but the other stuff are just banned, like the gender cards do go back in. Judgment. Ongoing. When you draw this card, choose one. You must use Pokemon that are all from the same generation, or you must use Pokemon that are all from different generations. Expand. Your choice of same generation or different generations is permanent for as long as this card puts in play. But if you choose same generation, you can later change which generation you want. If you are playing a game that only has Pokemon from one generation, like Gen 1, or Fire Red, Leaf Green, Black and White, ignore this card and draw another. Pokemon with cross-generation evolutions, like Smoochum, Murkrow, can count as belonging to any of them. Pokemon with branched cross-generation evolutions only count as belonging to the generations in their own branch. Like Eevee can count as generation 1, 2, 4, or 6, but Jolteon can only count as 1, and Glaceon can only count as 1 or 4. If Pokemon with regional variant forms can count as belonging to either the generation that first introduced their species or the generation that introduced their own form, like Cantonia Meowth, only counts as Gen 1. Alolan Meowth can count as Gen 1 or Gen 7. Galarian Meowth can count as Gen 1 or Gen 8. Okay. That one was a mouthful. I drew this card, I remember, and it was really late in the game, and I guess I did not read this all the way, which I keep talking about, like, make sure you read all this stuff, because I was confused about if my Galarian, or my Alolan Persian, counted as Gen 1 or Gen 7, so I could have counted it as either, but I chose that. I was like, oh, it feels like it's Gen 1 to me, so it's another instance of me making this harder than it is, but it's pretty fun. I was playing Gen 8, so it was like more obvious to choose, like based off what I had, to just choose everything as being from different generations. But I played this one time in Soul Silver and it was like, oh, I should just choose one, because in that game you only have 2 generations to pull from. So it's just like, it's a judgment call. I see what you did there. The world. Immediate. Revoke the effects of all other cards currently in play. Only petrified Pokemon and Pokemon in the vessel remain unusable. Catch the first Pokemon you see in this area, or free one petrified Pokemon, or teach one of your party Pokemon a TMTR move of your choice. This is just like the ultimate saving grace card. It's just like revoke everything. This is a clean slate card, so you wouldn't have to worry about any of the ongoing effects, nothing. You just can't unpetrify your everything or take stuff out of the vessel. Okay, in conclusion, I would just like to thank everyone that made it this far into the video, and I am gonna ask to like, share, and subscribe so we can get this concept of just like an alternate challenge run of Pokemon games that just isn't a Nuzlocke. I just think it's really refreshing, and it would be great if more people started doing this and it really caught on, because I think it's been a thing for a few years now, but I haven't seen that many people do it outside of like EXP share podcasts and like a couple like series on YouTube. So I'm definitely interested in doing more of these in the future. So I would stay tuned for the video about my experience of it with Sword and Shield upcoming, and I'm gonna post the VODs of that entire playthrough will be available to watch as well. And my plan is to do the next Kingslocke in BDSP, so I will catch you there where I stream on Twitch. Thank you.